He stood before 500 wolves and said the words that would cost him everything. She is useless to this pack, useless to this throne, and useless to me. 500 pairs of eyes watched her absorb it. 500 wolves witnessed the lunar elect, the woman the moon had chosen for their king, stand in the center of the great ceremonial ring with her chin up and her hands steady and her eyes dry, because she had promised herself years ago that she would never let him see her break. She did not break. She nodded once, turned around, and walked away from the Alpha King of Ashvale, the most powerful shifter in 5 territories, in front of every wolf who had ever mattered. She walked calmly, deliberately, like a woman who had already made a decision. No one knew what she was carrying when she left. No one knew what she would become. And no one, least of all the king, knew that the moment she crossed that border, the clock on his reign began to count down. If you have ever loved a story about a woman who leaves before they deserve her, stays strong even when it destroys her, and comes back, not for him, but as something he never saw coming, then stay with me, because this one will wreck you in the best possible way. Welcome. I am so glad you are here. If you are new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I post new stories every week, and trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. And if you have been here before, you already know, we do not do halfway on this channel. We go all the way in. Let us begin. Her name was Celine Avery, and she had been invisible for so long she had almost started to believe it was her natural state. She was 22 years old, the daughter of a mid-rank wolf and a human mother who had died when Celine was 4, which meant she had grown up in the Ashvale pack as the girl who did not quite fit. Not powerless, not quite powerful, not human, not fully wolf. The kind of person a pack hierarchy was designed to overlook, because acknowledging her would mean acknowledging the complicated spaces between the clean, ordered ranks they had spent generations maintaining. She had learned to be useful instead. That was the word she lived by. Useful. She helped the healers with their herb preparation. She tutored the younger pups in reading and tracking. She organized the pack library, 3 rooms of territorial records and historical accounts that no one had properly catalogued in 30 years, and she did it all quietly, efficiently, without asking for recognition or rank or reward, because she understood instinctively that drawing attention to herself was a luxury she could not afford. The pack noticed her work. They did not notice her. That was fine. Or it had been fine, for 21 years and 11 months. Right up until the night of the autumn gathering, when the moon rose full and blood-red over the Ashvale Mountains, and the sacred bond-marking ceremony that happened once every 7 years sent a pulse of recognition through every unmated wolf in 5 territories. And that pulse pointed, with the merciless precision of something far older and more certain than human logic, directly at her. Celine had been stacking records in the East Archive when it hit her. A warmth in her chest like a coal coming to life. A pull in a direction she had never felt before. North, toward the Great Hall, toward the ceremony she had not been invited to attend because she was not high-ranked enough to stand in the ceremonial ring. She had pressed her hand flat against the shelf of records and breathed carefully and told herself it was a coincidence. Then the warmth sharpened into a tug so insistent it nearly lifted her off her feet. It was not a coincidence. She had heard of it. Everyone in any wolf pack had heard of it. The mate bond, that ancient, biological, spiritual, entirely inconvenient phenomenon that occasionally decided, without consulting anyone involved, that two wolves belonged to each other. It did not care about rank. It did not care about compatibility. It did not care about the fact that the pull she was feeling was leading her toward a ceremony she had not been invited to, in a hall she was not permitted to enter, toward a man she had spoken to exactly once in her life. The Alpha King of Ashvale. Selim Varin. 27 years old. 6'4". Shoulders like the ridge of a mountain, and a jawline that looked like it had been carved by someone who took architectural precision seriously. The kind of man who entered a room and immediately became the gravitational center of it without appearing to try. His wolf was enormous, silver-gray, with eyes that burned gold during a shift and stayed cold and unreadable in human form. He had been alpha for 4 years, having taken the title from his father at 23 in the traditional challenge. He had won in under 3 minutes. Nobody had challenged him since. He was not cruel, precisely. He was simply absolute. A man who had been trained from birth to hold a territory together through will and precision, and the particular kind of ruthlessness that masquerades as fairness. He did not play favorites. He did not show weakness. He did not bend. And he had, as of 6 months ago, been engaged to Mira Ashworth, the daughter of the neighboring Greystone Pax Alpha. A political match arranged by their respective councils. Clean, strategic, and deeply convenient for everyone involved. Celine stood in the East Archive with her hand pressed to a shelf of 30-year-old territorial records, and understood with terrible, crystalline clarity that she was about to become deeply inconvenient. She could ignore it. She had heard of wolves ignoring a mate bond. It was painful, a slow grinding ache that worsened with distance and time, but it was survivable. People had done it. People had looked at the bond and looked at their lives and made a quiet, private decision that the cost of pursuing it was higher than the cost of letting it fade. She could do that. She was very good at making things convenient for everyone else. She smoothed her hands down the front of her work tunic, picked up her catalogue, and went back to her records. The bond hummed in her chest like a second heartbeat. She ignored it for 9 days. On the 10th day, it ignored her back, and sent the Alpha King of Ashvale directly to the East Archive with an expression on his face like a man who had been fighting something for 9 days and lost on the 10th. He filled the doorway of the archive the way he filled every space he entered. Completely, without apology, with the low-level magnetic force of an alpha whose wolf was at or near the surface. His eyes found her across 3 rows of shelving with an accuracy that told her his wolf had known exactly where she was before he even opened the door. They stared at each other. Celine set down her catalogue very carefully. "Alpha Varin," she said. "You felt it," he said. "Not a question." "I do not know what you are referring to," Celine said, which was the most unconvincing sentence she had ever produced. Something moved across his face. Not quite amusement, not quite irritation, the particular expression of a man who is dealing with a situation he did not ask for and cannot immediately solve. "You are going to pretend you did not feel it." "I am going to finish cataloguing these land records," Celine said, "which I was doing before you came in, and which still needs to be done. If you need something from the archive, I am happy to help you find it." He stared at her for a very long moment. Then he turned and left without another word. Celine waited until she heard the outer door close, sat down on the floor between two shelving units, put her face in her hands, and spent 3 minutes doing something she never allowed herself to do. She panicked. Then she stood up, dusted off her knees, and went back to the land records. He came back the next day. And the day after that. He did not explain himself. He did not announce his presence or make it into an occasion. He simply appeared in the archive in the late afternoon with the same contained, almost bewildered energy of a man following an instinct he had not authorized. And he stayed for an hour, and then he left. He did not speak to her the first 3 times. On the 4th visit, he picked up one of the land records she had set aside for recataloguing and read the first page with what appeared to be genuine interest. "These boundary markers are wrong," he said. "The Eastern Ridge Line was redrawn after the Greymoor conflict. Whoever filed this used the pre-conflict maps." Celine looked up from her own work. "I know. I have flagged 14 records with the same error. They need to be cross-referenced against the 1987 treaty documentation before I can correct them." He looked at her. "You found 14 errors in records my archivists have maintained for 30 years. Your archivists catalog by date. They do not read for content." A pause. Something shifted in his expression, so subtle she might have missed it if she had not been, by that point, paying very close attention to his face. "How long have you been working in this archive?" 3 years. "Why?" "Because it needed doing," Celine said simply. "And no one else was doing it." He set the record down. He looked at her in the particular way he had, direct, assessing, like a man running calculations she was not privy to. Then he picked up the next record in her flagged pile and kept reading. He stayed for 2 hours that day. He did not speak again after the boundary marker conversation. He did not need to. The bond stretched between them like a warm, persistent hum. Not demanding, not intrusive, simply there, the way a heartbeat is there, present and steady and impossible to fully ignore. Celine told herself she was not looking forward to his visits. She reorganized the same shelf 4 times on a Wednesday when he was an hour later than usual. He was not a gentleman. She understood that quickly. He was not the type to soften his edges for company or perform warmth he did not feel. He was precise, exacting. He had the particular quality of absolute competence that can look like coldness from the outside and probably was cold, some of the time, in the parts of his life that required it. But in the archive, in the late afternoons, reading flagged land records with ink on his fingers and his formal alpha coat abandoned on the chair nearest the door. He was something else. Something she did not have a word for, because she was fairly certain she was not supposed to be seeing it. On the 12th visit, she asked him, without looking up from her work, "Does your counsel know you are here?" "No," he said. "Does Mira Ashworth know you are here?" The silence that followed was 3 seconds long, which was answer enough. "We have not discussed it," he said finally. "You should," Celine said. "I know." He came back the next day anyway. She was starting to understand that Selim Varen's relationship with things he knew he should do was complicated. He was a man who had been told what he should do from the moment he was old enough to understand language, and he had done most of it, dutifully and excellently, and the accumulated weight of all that dutiful excellence had built something behind his eyes that looked, in certain lights, remarkably like a man who had forgotten what he actually wanted. She did not say any of this to him. She handed him the next flagged record and went back to her cataloging. 3 weeks into the archive visits, he arrived one afternoon to find her up a ladder, attempting to retrieve a box from the highest shelf, which had been placed there by someone with either exceptional reach or a profound lack of consideration for anyone of average height. "Stop," he said. "I have it," Celine said, which was not strictly true. She had the edge of the box, and the ladder was wobbling in a way that suggested it had opinions about her weight distribution. "You do not have it. I am about to have it." The ladder shifted. The box tilted. Celine grabbed the shelf with her free hand to stabilize herself and managed to hook 2 fingers through the box handle at the same moment that Selim's hand closed around her waist from behind, steady and certain and warm, and lifted her off the ladder entirely. He set her on the ground. He did not immediately let go. The bond flared between them, vivid and golden and entirely unhelpful, and for a moment they were both very still, his hands at her waist and the box tucked under her arm and the archive around them quiet and dust-moted and completely indifferent to the catastrophic awkwardness of the situation. "Thank you," Celine said. He let go, stepped back. The absence of his hands was a physical thing, a cold where there had been warmth, and Celine hated herself a little for noticing. "You should have asked someone to retrieve it," he said. "There was no one to ask. There is always someone to ask. You are not." He stopped. "Not what?" she said. He did not finish the sentence. He picked up the box from under her arm, set it on the table, and opened it with the particular efficiency of a man redirecting himself. "What is in here?" "Pre-treaty correspondence from the Silver Fen negotiation," Celine said. 1974. The original letters, not the copies in the main record. I have been trying to reach them for a week. He looked at the box of letters. He looked at her. "A week. The ladder is unstable. Why did you not report the ladder?" "I kept meaning to." Something crossed his face that was almost, a smile. Not quite. But the closest she had seen. "You have flagged 14 archival errors in 30 years of records. You have identified a misfiling in the Silver Fen correspondence that my senior archivist missed. And you have been waiting a week to report an unstable ladder because you kept meaning to." "I have a system," Celine said with dignity. The ladder was lower priority. This time, it was definitely a smile. Brief, controlled, quickly suppressed, but real. She felt it like a small warm stone pressed against her sternum. He left that afternoon without the smile, but she had seen it. She was in significant trouble, and she knew it. The pack noticed before either of them admitted anything. This was perhaps inevitable. Wolf packs are, by their nature, communities built on close observation. Everyone knows everyone's business. Everyone tracks the subtle shifts in rank and alliance and mood. And an alpha who suddenly develops a habit of spending his late afternoons in an archive that he has not visited in 4 years of leadership is notable. The whispers started quietly, the way whispers always do. By the 4th week of archive visits, Celine was aware that people were watching her differently. Not with hostility, not yet, but with a particular speculative attention that she recognized as the pack recalibrating around new information. Who is she, exactly? What is she to him? Should we know about this? The high-rank wolves were the most obvious about it. Kalle Reinhardt, the beta female and Selim's closest advisor, appeared in the archive one morning under the guise of retrieving a specific record and spent 45 minutes in the vicinity while Celine worked, assessing her with the particular quiet thoroughness of a woman who has spent years managing a complicated man and has learned to identify his blind spots in advance. Celine retrieved the record Kalle asked for, answered her questions about the cataloging system, and did not acknowledge the assessment. After Kalle left, she stood at the window for a long moment and looked out at the training grounds below and felt the weight of what was happening settle more heavily on her shoulders. She was not naive. She understood what a mate bond meant in a pack context, and she understood even more clearly what it meant in the context of this particular pack, with this particular alpha, who was politically engaged to someone else and whose council had spent 4 years carefully constructing an alliance that a mate bond between their king and a mid-rank archive worker would very thoroughly complicate. She also understood, with the bone-deep honesty she had cultivated through 22 years of living in the margins, that she was in love with him. Not because of the bond, or not only because of the bond. Because of the afternoons in the archive. Because of the way he read land records with the same focused attention he presumably gave to territorial strategy. Because of the boundary marker error he had caught on the first day, and the way he had said your archivists do not read for content with something that sounded almost like respect. Because of the one almost smile she had seen and the one real smile she had felt. Because he was, underneath the absolute certainty and the controlled precision and the public face of an alpha who had never once needed to be anything other than immovable, a complicated, privately struggling man who had been coming to a dusty archive for 4 weeks without quite knowing how to say the thing he was clearly there to say. She was in love with him. And she was very nearly certain he felt something back. And she was absolutely certain that neither of those things was going to be enough to save her from what was coming. The council meeting happened on a Tuesday. She heard about it secondhand, from one of the younger healers who had overheard 2 senior wolves discussing it in the corridor outside the main hall. The council had requested a formal meeting with the Alpha regarding the upcoming bonding ceremony with Mira Ashworth, which was scheduled for the winter solstice, now 10 weeks away. There had been rumors, the healer said, eyes wide with the particular excitement of someone delivering significant gossip, that the Alpha had been spending time with someone, that his behavior had shifted, that the ceremony timeline needed to be confirmed. Celine thanked the healer for the information, went back to the archive, and sat very still for a long time. He did not come that afternoon, or the next afternoon. On the 3rd day, she arrived at the archive to find a new ladder installed in the place of the old one. Solid, properly anchored, with rubber feet and a safety rail. Someone had replaced it quietly, overnight, without leaving a note. She stood looking at the new ladder for a long moment. Then she climbed it and retrieved the pre-treaty correspondence herself and went back to work. He came back on the 6th day. He looked like a man who had spent 6 days fighting something and had not particularly won. The controlled precision was still there. It was always there. She was beginning to understand it was structural, load-bearing, the thing holding him upright. But underneath it, visible in the set of his jaw and the particular stillness of his hands, something had shifted. He sat in the chair by the door and did not pick up a record. Celine kept working. "They want confirmation," he said after a long time. "I know," she said. "The ceremony is in 10 weeks." "I know." He was quiet. She turned a page. The archive was very still around them. Celine. The way he said her name. He had only said it twice before, both times in passing, using the clinical distance of a man who was very aware of exactly how much warmth he was allowing, but this time it was different. This time it had the weight of something that had been decided. She put down her pen. She looked at him. He was looking at her the way she had caught him looking at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching, direct and unguarded and with an openness that sat strangely on a face built for authority. His wolf was near the surface. She could feel it through the bond, restless, reaching, pressing against whatever internal control he was maintaining. "I need you to tell me," he said carefully, "what you want." Celine held his gaze. Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest, and the bond was blazing warm and insistent, and she was very aware that whatever she said next was going to matter in a way that most words do not. "I want," she said slowly, "to not be a problem for you to manage." Something flinched behind his eyes. "That is not what I asked. It is the only answer that is fair to both of us." "Celine, you have a ceremony in 10 weeks, she said. "You have an alliance that matters to this pack. You have a council that is already watching. And I am," she paused, and she kept her voice very steady. "I am someone who catalogues records in the East Archive. I am not going to sit here and tell you what I want when what I want would cost you things you cannot afford to lose." The silence stretched between them. "What if I said," Selim said very quietly, "that I wanted to know anyway? Not because I am certain what I would do with the answer, but because I am not willing to keep not knowing." Celine looked at him for a long, aching moment. "Then I want to stay," she said, "in this archive, doing work that matters. And I want you to go to your council and confirm your ceremony and take care of your pack. And I want," her voice caught, just barely, and she controlled it, "I want to stop feeling like I am waiting for something that is not coming." He stood. He crossed the archive in 5 steps. He stopped a foot away from her, which was closer than he had ever stood willingly, and she could feel the warmth of him and the pull of the bond and the particular quality of his attention, which was the most focused thing she had ever been on the receiving end of. "I am not engaged to Mira Ashworth because I chose her," he said. "I want you to know that. I am engaged to her because every decision I have made since I was 17 years old has been about what this pack needs. Not what He stopped. His jaw tightened. "I know," Celine said softly. "I do not think you do," he said. "I do not think you have the faintest idea what these 6 weeks have cost me." They looked at each other. And then the archive door opened, and Kalle Reinhardt stepped inside with 2 council members behind her, and an expression on her face that said she had been expecting to find exactly what she had found, and was not pleased about it. "Alpha," Kalle said. "The council is waiting." Selim did not move for 3 full seconds. He looked at Celine. She looked back at him. The bond hummed between them like a question that no one had answered. Then he stepped back, turned, and walked out of the archive without looking back. Kalle watched him go. Then she turned and looked at Celine with an expression that was complicated. Not hostile, but weighted with the particular gravity of a woman who has been managing impossible situations for a long time and can recognize a new one arriving. "Be careful," Kalle said quietly. Then she left too. Celine stood in the archive alone and pressed both hands flat on the table and breathed. The bond ached like a bruise. The autumn gathering was 3 weeks later. It was the largest ceremonial gathering in the Ashevale Pack calendar, held on the night of the harvest moon, in the great outdoor ring at the center of the territory, attended by every wolf of rank and many who were not. It was traditionally a celebration, a renewal of pack bonds, an acknowledgement of the season and the community and the ties that held everyone together. It was also this year the occasion chosen by the council for a formal public acknowledgement of the Alpha's upcoming bonding ceremony. A declaration, a confirmation, offered in front of the whole pack, that the alliance with Greystone was proceeding. Celine attended because attendance at the gathering was obligatory for all pack members. She stood near the back of the assembled crowd with the other mid-rank wolves and healers and told herself she was going to be fine. She watched Selim take his place in the center of the ring with the contained authority that was as natural to him as breathing. She watched the ceremony proceed, the ritual greetings, the acknowledgement of the season, the formal words of community that an alpha spoke every year at this gathering. His voice carried across the ring with effortless command, and the pack responded the way they always did, with the particular settled attention of a community that trusted its leader. She was almost fine. And then something happened. She would never be entirely sure, afterward, what caused it. The bond had been pressed down and quiet for the 3 weeks since the archive meeting, muffled under layers of careful distance and mutual, unspoken agreement. But the gathering ring was charged with something. The collective energy of 500 wolves in close proximity under a full moon, perhaps, or the particular pull of ceremony, or simply the fact that she was looking at him and he had, despite himself, looked up and found her in the crowd. Their eyes met across 200 feet of assembled wolves. The bond flared. Not subtly. Not quietly. In the way that things which have been suppressed for weeks flare when they finally find an opening. Sudden and total, a wave of gold warmth crashing through her chest, and she saw by the way his entire body went briefly and completely still, through his as well. 500 wolves noticed their alpha stop moving. The woman standing at his side, not Mira Ashworth, who was not yet present, but Kala, noticed first. Her eyes swept the crowd with the speed of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for, and landed on Celine with an expression that was, very briefly, pure dread. Selim recovered in under 3 seconds. To anyone who did not know him, it might have looked like nothing. A pause. A breath. A man collecting his thoughts mid-ceremony. But the High Council's eldest member, Elder Barrick, was watching with the sharp eyes of a man who had served 4 alpha generations, and he had seen what happened. What followed was swift, and quiet, and devastating in the particular way that pack politics can be devastating. Bloodlessly, efficiently, through words rather than violence, which somehow makes them worse. Elder Barrick waited until after the ceremony. He requested a private council session. He emerged from it 1 hour later with the particular settled look of a man who had made a decision he believed was correct. The next morning, Celine was summoned to the central hall. She walked in expecting a private meeting. Possibly a warning. Possibly a formal request to remove herself from the archive, transfer her work to another pack member, create some manageable distance that everyone could point to as evidence that the situation had been handled. She was not expecting 500 wolves. She was not expecting the full gathering ring, hastily reconvened, with every senior wolf in Ashvale arranged in formal position and Elder Barrick standing at the center with the expression of a man conducting necessary business. She was not expecting Selim, at the front of the crowd, with his face completely closed. She understood in the 5 seconds it took her to cross the threshold and register the scene that she had made a fundamental error. She had believed, somewhere in the private architecture of her hope, that his conflict meant protection. That his conflict ion privately meant he would not let it come to this. She had been wrong. She stood in the center of the ring. Elder Barrick spoke the formal accusation: disruption of an alpha's contracted alliance, inappropriate conduct befitting a mid-rank wolf, conduct unbecoming of a pack member who owed loyalty to the whole over the individual. The words were formal and precise, and they landed like stones dropped from a great height. She did not look at Selim. She kept her eyes on the middle distance and her hands still at her sides and her face very carefully empty. Then Barrick turned to the Alpha and said, formally, for the record, for the 500 wolves assembled, "Alpha Varin, what is your judgment of this matter?" The silence that followed was exactly 4 seconds long. She counted. Then Selim's voice, quiet and absolute and perfectly controlled, carrying across the ring with the authority of a man who had never once let anyone see him waver. "She is useless to this pack, useless to this throne, and useless to me." The ring went quiet. Celine absorbed the words. She felt them go in, felt the particular blunt force of hearing something in public that is specifically designed to land in the places you are most unprotected. She felt the bond, still, horribly, present, twist and contract like something wounded. She looked at him then. Just once. He was looking at the middle distance. His jaw was set. His hands were still. His eyes were the iron-cold gray she had first known him by, and if there was anything behind them, she could not reach it. She nodded once. She turned around. She walked away. She was very calm. This was the part that surprised her most, the calm that descended the moment she crossed the threshold of the great ring and left 500 wolves behind her. She had expected grief, or rage, or the wet, chaotic wreckage of a heartbreak she had seen coming for weeks and had not managed to fully prepare for anyway. Instead, she was calm the way you are calm after a decision has been made and the part where you could still choose differently is definitively over. She walked to the archive first. She collected 3 things: the catalog she had been building for 3 years, the flagged records that still needed correction, and the pre-treaty Silverfen correspondence that she had finally retrieved from the high shelf the week before. She left everything else in careful order, the way she always left things. Then she went to the healer's wing and spoke briefly with the senior healer, a woman named Petra who had known Celine since she was a child and who listened to what Celine said with an expression that moved through shock, grief, and a specific bright-eyed anger, in that order. "You do not have to go," Petra said. "I know," Celine said. "I am going anyway." Petra looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned and went to the supply cabinet and began packing a bag with the efficiency of a woman who has helped people leave before. "Medicines," she said as she packed, "wound herbs, the tincture for fever, the one for infection. Things you need when you are somewhere without a healer on hand." Things that meant Petra, at least, did not believe she was coming back. At the bottom of the bag, Petra placed a small sealed jar of something amber gold, and said nothing. Celine looked at it. "For the nausea," Petra said, meeting her eyes with a steadiness that carried more information than her words. It will get worse before it gets better. Around week 8, usually. The world went very still. Celine sat down on the edge of the nearest cot. She had known. In the abstract, theoretical way that you know something you are not ready to look at directly, she had known for 2 weeks. The sensitivity that had been climbing steadily. The mornings that had become complicated. The particular way her body had been feeling like something was reorganizing itself from the inside without consulting her. She had been telling herself it was stress. The archive. The situation. "How long have you known?" she asked. "I am a healer," Petra said gently. "I noticed 3 weeks ago. I was waiting for you to tell me." Celine pressed both hands flat on her thighs and looked at the amber jar and did not let herself do the math yet, because if she did the math, she would have to think about what it meant, and if she thought about what it meant right now, in this room, 3 hours after being publicly declared useless by the father of the child she was apparently carrying, she was not going to survive the next 10 minutes with the calm she needed. She breathed. She picked up the bag. "Thank you," she said. "Celine," Petra said. "Be safe." "I will." "And when you are ready," Petra paused. "Come back. Pack or no pack. When you are ready, come back." Celine nodded. She walked out of the healer's wing, through the east corridor, past the archive with its new ladder and its ordered shelves and its 3 years of her invisible, patient work, and out through the servants' gate on the south side of the compound. The gate nobody watched closely, because it led to the lower orchards, and nobody important ever needed to use it. She had a travel pack. A bag of healer's supplies. 3 years of catalogue work and a box of pre-treaty correspondence she had not technically been authorized to remove. She also had, apparently, an heir to the Ashvale pack throne growing quietly and without announcement inside her. She walked south through the orchards in the dark, under a moon that was starting to set. The bond, that warm, persistent, thoroughly unwelcome hum, stretched as she moved, thinning with distance, and she braced for it to hurt more than it did. It hurt a great deal. She walked through it. By the time the Ashvale compound was aglow on the horizon behind her, she had made 3 decisions. First, she was not going back. Second, she was not going to let the bond decide that for her. She had spent 22 years making herself useful and invisible and convenient for everyone around her. She was not spending the next 22 years being a geographic captive of a man who had looked at 500 people and chosen to call her worthless because it was easier than being honest. Third, whatever came next, wherever she went, whatever she built, whatever the child she was carrying grew up to be, it was going to be on her terms. Not pack terms, not bond terms, not the terms of a man who had given her no terms at all and then acted surprised when she stopped waiting for them. She was done waiting. She walked south until the orchards gave way to open road, and then she kept walking. Section 6. The world without her. Selim Varin did not sleep that night. He sat in his study with a report he had been reading for 2 hours without absorbing a single word, and he sat with the particular quality of stillness that he employed as a substitute for movement when movement would reveal too much, and he sat with the bond. It was different now. It had always been present, warm, insistent, oriented, but now it was stretching. Thinning in a direction that his wolf tracked with an accuracy that was making the study feel smaller with every passing minute. South. She was going south, and she was moving steadily, and each increment of distance was a physical thing, a cold where there had been warmth, a silence where there had been a second heartbeat. He had done what was necessary. He told himself this, in the specific controlled way that he told himself things when they needed to be believed and not questioned. He had done what was necessary. The alliance. The pack. The clear and unambiguous signal to his council and his community that whatever had been perceived in the gathering ring was nothing. An anomaly, a moment, something that had been addressed and closed and was not going to become a problem. He had done what was necessary. His wolf disagreed. It had been disagreeing since the words left his mouth, actually, with a vehemence that he was currently managing through approximately the same iron will he applied to everything else, but it was louder than usual, more insistent. A low, constant pressure behind his sternum that worsened with each increment of southward distance. He put down the report. He pressed 2 fingers to his temple. He had not handled it well. He was aware of this. He had been given, by Elder Barrick, a very specific set of words and a very specific public occasion, and he had delivered them with the expressionless precision of a man who had been trained to execute difficult orders without flinching. He had not flinched. He had not looked at her. He had delivered the judgment cleanly, and he had watched, in his peripheral vision, her single nod, and he had not let himself feel it until she was out of the ring. He had felt it then. He was feeling it now. His beta, Kala, knocked and entered without waiting. The privilege of a woman who had known him since they were children and had very clear opinions about the limits of his authority over her conduct. She took one look at him and sat down in the chair across the desk with the expression of someone who has arranged her face carefully for a difficult conversation. She left, Kala said. He did not react. Petra in the healer's wing helped her pack. She left through the south gate about an hour ago. A pause. She took the Silver Fen correspondence. This, despite everything, almost made him smile. He controlled it. She was cataloguing it. She was also, according to Petra. Kala stopped. She looked at him with an expression he could not immediately read. Selim. There is something you need to know. Tell me. Kala told him. The silence that followed lasted a very long time. How long has Petra known? He asked finally. His voice was perfectly controlled. Everything about him was perfectly controlled. He was holding himself together with both hands, and the accumulated practice of 27 years of being the person nobody was allowed to watch fall apart. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks that he had spent doing the careful, necessary work of building distance. And in those 3 weeks, the situation had been different, larger, more consequential than any of the people making calculations about alliances and councils and pack optics had known. She did not tell me, he said. She probably did not feel she had the right to, Kala said quietly. He stood. He walked to the window. He put both hands on the sill and looked out at the dark compound and felt the bond pulling south, thin and aching and getting thinner. She was going to leave anyway, Kala said. Even if Petra had not told her tonight. She had made the decision before the gathering. I know, he said. What are you going to do? He looked out at the dark for a long time. Nothing tonight, he said. Selim. Not tonight, Kala. His voice was quiet. Absolute. The tone that meant the conversation was done. Calla stood. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame and said, without turning around, she flagged 14 errors in 30 years of records that no one else caught. She replaced a broken ladder system 3 years old without being asked. She walked out of that ring today with more dignity than anyone in it deserved. And she is carrying. I know what she is carrying, he said. A pause. Then act like it, Calla said. And left. He stood at the window until the bond stretched so thin it felt like a thread instead of a cord, and he pressed his hand flat against the cold glass and felt his wolf pace and snarl and demand, and he did what he had done his entire life. He held it together. He told himself he had time. He was wrong. The town of Verith was 3 days south of Ashvale, situated at the crossing of 2 trade roads in the neutral territory between 3 pack boundaries. It was not a wolf town. It was the kind of place that accumulated people who did not belong elsewhere, a mixture of humans and part-bloods and wolves who had left their packs for one reason or another, and it operated with the comfortable pragmatism of a community that had decided not to ask too many questions. Celine arrived on a Tuesday, tired and footsore and navigating the particular physical complexity of early pregnancy with the grim determination of a woman who has decided to be fine about everything and is not entirely succeeding. She found a room above a bookshop run by an elderly woman named Doris who asked no questions, charged reasonable rent, and communicated primarily through meaningful looks and the strategic placement of cups of tea. She found work in the town's records office within the week. The Verith records were, if anything, in worse shape than the Ashvale archive. Decades of misfiling, duplicated entries, boundary records that conflicted with each other in ways that could cause genuine legal problems if anyone bothered to look closely. The town clerk, a harassed-looking man named Edvard, looked at Celine's 3-year Ashvale catalogue, said, "Oh, thank goodness," and offered her a salary that was modest but sufficient. She settled. This was not the same as being happy. She was aware of the difference. The bond ached at a distance, a constant low-grade presence, like a bruise she had learned to work around. She had been told by the few people she knew who had experience with severed or suppressed bonds, that it got easier. She was waiting for easier. In the meantime, she organized records by day and lay awake at night listening to the particular quiet of a town that was not her pack. And she put both hands over the barely there curve of her stomach, and had conversations with the person growing there that she kept determinately practical. "You are going to be fine," she said. "Both of us. We are going to be fine." In the second week, she went to Verith as healer, a competent, incurious woman named Sable who confirmed what Petra had already told her, provided the care she needed, and did not ask about the father. In the third week, a wolf she did not recognize appeared at the edge of Veritha's market square and spent 20 minutes purchasing nothing while his eyes tracked a movement through the stalls with a patience that suggested he had been doing it for a while. She bought her produce without acknowledging him and went home a different way. He was not one of Selam's wolves. She would have known his pack scent. He was Greystone, Mira Ashworth's family. She sat in her room above the bookshop and thought carefully about what that meant and what she was going to do about it. The Greystone wolf appeared again 2 days later, this time outside the records office. He did not approach her. He watched. Celine finished her workday, said goodnight to Edvard, walked out the front door, stopped directly in front of the wolf, and said, "If you have something to say, say it." He blinked. He had clearly not expected direct confrontation from a woman. He had presumably been sent to observe quietly. "I am just," he started. "You are watching me," Celine said. "You have been watching me for 3 days. You smell like Greystone. I can make an inference from there, or you can tell me who sent you and what they want, and we can save ourselves both a great deal of time." The wolf stared at her. "Mira Ashworth sent you," Celine said. It was not a question. Something in his expression confirmed it. "Tell her," Celine said carefully, "that I am not a problem she needs to solve. I am not in Ashvale. I am not pursuing anything. I am working in a records office in a neutral town and not bothering anyone." She held the wolf's gaze. "And tell her that whatever she is worried about, she should take it up with the person who actually made the decisions. Not me." She walked back to the bookshop. She went upstairs, sat on her bed, and spent 10 minutes being more frightened than she had allowed herself to be since the night she left. Mira Ashworth was not, from everything Celine had ever heard, a cruel person. She was the daughter of an alpha, practical and politically educated, who had presumably entered her engagement with Selim with the same clear-eyed awareness of its strategic nature that he had. She was not a villain. She was a woman in an impossible position who was apparently paying attention. The question was, to what end? Celine did not know. She put her hands over her stomach and made herself breathe. "We are going to be fine," she said again. She was starting to believe it slightly less than she had been. Back in Ashvale, the pack was functioning. This was the thing about packs. They functioned. They were designed to function. The rhythms of community and hierarchy and shared territory kept rolling forward regardless of what was happening at the center, and Selim Varan was, if nothing else, a man who kept the rhythms rolling. He held his council meetings. He reviewed his territorial reports. He approved the resource allocation for winter, presided over 3 minor disputes between neighboring families, and conducted himself with the seamless authority that his pack had come to rely on so completely that most of them did not notice the seams. Kala noticed the seams. Fun, his beta male, who had been away at the northern border during the gathering and had returned to find everything quietly catastrophic, noticed the seams. The seams were: he was not sleeping. He was eating less than he should. His wolf, usually a steady, contained presence that expressed itself through the particular quality of alert readiness that all alphas carried, had become something less contained. Not dangerous, but tighter, more compressed. Like a spring that was being wound past its comfortable tolerance. And he had, in the 6 weeks since the gathering, sent 3 separate messengers south and recalled all 3 of them before they reached Verith. Finn found him at his desk at 2 in the morning on a Thursday, which was not unusual. Selim at his desk at 2 in the morning was practically a pack tradition, but the particular quality of his stillness was different, and Finn sat down across from him without being invited and said, "You need to tell me what you are planning." "I have not decided," Selim said. "That is a problem." "I am aware." Finn looked at him with the directness of a man who had spent 7 years serving an alpha he genuinely respected, and had consequently developed both a high tolerance for difficult conversations and a very low tolerance for avoidance. "You know what she is carrying." "Yes." "You know that Greystone knows." This got a reaction. Barely, a slight sharpening of attention. "How?" "Mira has a contact in Verith." probably placed before any of this happened. She is thorough. Fun paused. She has not told her father yet. Callah's contact in Greystone confirmed it. Mira is managing it quietly, which suggests she is waiting to see what you do. Selim was quiet for a long moment. What do you think she wants? I think, Finn said carefully, that Mira Ashworth is smarter than anyone in this situation has given her credit for. I think she has understood for some time that this alliance is more complicated than her father believes. And I think she is currently deciding whether the complication is manageable or whether she needs to make a move. A pause. She is not going to wait forever. Selim pressed 2 fingers to his temple. And Celine. Celine is working in the Verith Records office. She lives above a bookshop. She is healthy, according to Callah's healer contact, and she is not. Fun stopped. She is not coming back, Selim. Not unless something changes. I know. Do you? Fun's voice was careful. Because you have sent 3 messengers south and recalled all 3 of them, which suggests that you believe something is going to resolve itself without you having to do the hard part. And I am telling you, as your beta and as someone who has watched you make excellent decisions for 4 years and one terrible one, it is not going to resolve itself. Selim looked at him. You told her she was useless, Finn said. Not as an accusation. Just the fact of it, laid flat on the table between them. In front of 500 people. You gave Barak the words he needed, and you delivered them, and you did not look at her. And she walked out with more grace than you deserved. And she has not made a single move since that was anything other than completely self-contained and dignified. He paused. She is not waiting for you to fix it. She is building a life without you. And she is doing it effectively, which should surprise no one who has read the Ashvale archive catalogue. The silence went on for a while. I did not know, Selim said finally. His voice was very quiet. About the child. When in the ring. I did not know. I know, Finn said. It does not. He stopped. It does not change what I said. No, Finn agreed. It does not. But it changes what you have to do next. He stood. Figure out what that is. And do not send any more messengers you are going to recall. He walked to the door. Either go yourself or do not go at all. But decide. He left. Selim sat at his desk until 4 in the morning. Then he went to the window and stood with his hand on the cold glass and felt the bond, thin and aching and stretched over 80 miles of neutral territory, and felt his wolf pace in the particular way it had been pacing for 6 weeks, wearing a groove in the floor of its cage. He thought about the archive, the boundary marker errors, the new ladder, the almost smile. He thought about a woman who had walked out of a public humiliation with her chin up and her hands still and her eyes dry, because she had promised herself she would not let him see her break. He thought about what Finn had said. She is not waiting for you. He made a decision. Celine was alphabetizing land grant records on a Wednesday morning when Doris appeared in the doorway of her room with a letter and an expression that suggested the letter was significant. It was from Petra. Petra's letters had been arriving every 2 weeks with the reliability of a woman who had decided, unilaterally, that Celine was going to have someone checking in on her whether she wanted it or not. They were practical, affectionate, and full of careful pack news delivered in the tone of a woman who was aware she was being read by someone who was working hard not to care about any of it. This letter was different. Celine read it twice standing in her doorway, then sat down on her bed and read it a third time. The bonding ceremony with Mira Ashworth had been postponed. Officially, the stated reason was a Greystone family matter. One of Myra's younger siblings had taken ill, requiring the family's attention, and the ceremony had been delayed until spring at the earliest. This was the official version, delivered through appropriate channels, accepted by both councils with the polished diplomacy of people who have agreed to believe a convenient explanation. Unofficially, Petra wrote, Mira Ashworth had requested a private meeting with Alpha Varin 2 weeks ago. The meeting had lasted 4 hours. No one knew what was said. But Mira had departed for Greystone the following morning, and the postponement had been announced that afternoon. Celine sat with this information for a long time. She noticed, with the honesty she tried to maintain about herself, that she felt two things simultaneously and somewhat contradictorily. The first was a surge of something she refused to call hope, because hope had a cost she was not sure she could afford again. The second was a flare of sharp, specific anger, because whatever Mira Ashworth had said in that 4-hour meeting, whatever had moved this situation from one configuration to another, it had moved it without anyone asking Celine anything. She was still a variable being managed, just possibly by different hands. She folded the letter. She put it in the box where she kept Petra's letters, next to the sealed amber jar and the silver fen correspondence and the 3-year catalogue of work that a pack of 500 wolves had never officially acknowledged. She went to the records office. She organized land grants. She was very good at it. The weeks that followed were quiet, productive. The Verith records were beginning to take shape in a way that made Edvard say things like, "This is remarkable," and "Have you considered whether you would want to stay permanently?" and "I might know some people in the Regional Administrative Council." The healer Sable confirmed that everything was progressing well, and Celine had reached the point where her body had stopped staging its morning protests and settled into something more cooperative. She was 18 weeks along when the Greystone wolf stopped appearing in the market. She was 19 weeks along when she realized she was being followed by someone else. Not a Greystone wolf. Not anyone she could immediately place by scent. Someone who was very good at not being noticed, which, given that she had spent 22 years being very good at not being noticed herself, she found both professionally impressive and profoundly unsettling. She mentioned it to no one. She started taking different routes home. She was 20 weeks along, and it was a clear cold evening in late autumn, and she was walking home from the records office through the back lane that ran behind the market stalls, when she turned a corner and found Selim Varin standing in it. He was alone. No guard, no beta, no pack escort. He was wearing plain traveling clothes that were, she could tell, specifically chosen to not immediately announce that the Alpha King of Ashvale was standing in a back lane in Veritha's market district, which was either humility or strategy or possibly both. He looked different. The controlled precision was still there. It was structural. She had decided that a long time ago. But the controlled precision was holding together something that looked, this evening in the grey autumn light, like a man who had been running on willpower for 6 weeks and was aware that willpower was a finite resource. They looked at each other. The bond, that warm, persistent, maddening thread, blazed between them like something that had been patient long enough. Celine held it. She was good at holding things. You were following me, she said. For 3 days, he said. I was trying to decide. Decide what? He looked at her. His eyes moved to the visible curve beneath her coat, then back to her face, and something shifted in his expression that she did not have a word for. Something that was not guilt exactly, and not relief exactly, and was perhaps the particular thing a person feels when an abstract understanding becomes concrete and real and standing in front of them. Whether I had the right to be here, he said. Celine looked at him for a long moment. Do you? She asked. He did not answer immediately. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the archive, direct, unguarded, with the openness that sat so strangely on his face. I said things in that ring that he stopped. There is no version of what I said that was not wrong. Not the words. Not the occasion. Not the way I used your dignity as a tool because it was easier than being honest with my counsel. His jaw tightened. I know that. I am not here to ask you to forgive it. Then why are you here? She asked. Because you are carrying my child in a town 80 miles from your home, he said quietly. And because I spent 6 weeks recalling messengers and staring at territorial reports and telling myself the situation would resolve itself, and it has not resolved itself, and Fawn has pointed out, correctly, that a man who sends 3 messengers and recalls all 3 of them is not actually handling anything. He is just waiting. And I am done waiting. Celine held his gaze. Her heart was doing complicated things. The bond was doing complicated things. She had a very precise mental list of everything he had done and everything she had decided, and she consulted it now with the focus of a woman who had learned the hard way that warmth was not the same as safety. The ceremony, she said, Mira Ashworth, has been postponed. I know. Petra told me. A pause. I am not asking about the postponement. I am asking what you want. His eyes held hers. I want, he said carefully, to not be a problem you have to manage. She blinked. Something moved across his face, the ghost of a rueful awareness. He had used her words. She recognized them. He had been carrying them. Celine, he said, and her name in his mouth had all the weight of 6 weeks of silence and 3 recalled messengers and a study window at 4 in the morning. I am not good at this. I was not trained for this. I was trained to hold things together, not to, he paused. Not to stand in a back lane in a market town and admit that I have been wrong about most of it. Most of it, she said. All of it, he said. They stood in the back lane with the bond blazing warm between them and the autumn cold pressing in from all sides, and Celine felt, in the precise center of her chest, the first crack in the careful architecture of not hope she had been building for 6 weeks. I am not going back, she said. Not the way it was. I know. I am not. She stopped. I am not going to be managed. Not by you, not by your counsel, not by anyone. I have spent my entire life being convenient for other people, and I am finished with it. I know, he said again. You said I was useless in front of 500 people. Yes. You are going to have to do significantly better than standing in a back lane looking like a man who has not slept in 6 weeks. Something moved across his face, and it was the smile, real and brief and completely unguarded, the one she had felt like a warm stone in the archive all those weeks ago, and it hit her now like a physical thing, a wave of warmth that crested through the bond and threatened to undo 6 weeks of careful self-preservation. "I am aware," he said. Celine looked at him. She looked at him for a long time, at the controlled precision and the something underneath it, at the man who had spent 4 years being impeccable and 6 weeks being a disaster and 3 days following her through a market town trying to decide if he had the right to be there. "I have work tomorrow morning," she said finally. "I know. I am not going to decide anything tonight." "I did not come for a decision," he said. "I came because I was done waiting." A pause. "You can come to the records office tomorrow," she said. "If you want to be useful, there are 14 land-grant cross-references that need a second pair of eyes." He looked at her. "I am serious," she said. "The filing system is a disaster. Edvard means well, but he has been doing it wrong for 20 years. If you are going to spend time in Verith, you should be doing something constructive with it." "You want me to catalogue records," he said. "I want you to not stand in back lanes making significant statements and then disappear," she said. "I have had enough of significant statements. I am interested in what comes after them." Selim looked at her with the expression of a man who is understanding something for the first time. "Tomorrow morning," he said. 8 o'clock, she said. "Do not be late. Edvard hates lateness." She walked past him, home to the bookshop, and did not let herself look back. She was almost to the door when she heard him say, quiet and carrying just enough to reach her, "Celine." She stopped. She did not turn. "The boundary marker errors," he said. "In the Ashvale archive. There were 14. A pause. "I found 3 more last month," she said. "In the Silver Fen correspondence. I have been meaning to send them back." "Keep them," he said, "until you decide what you want to do with them." She went inside. She sat on her bed above the bookshop and put both hands over her stomach and felt the bond. No longer thin and aching, but warm and close and cautiously, tentatively, not yet resolved. "Well," she said to the person growing quietly and without announcement inside her, "that was not what I was expecting." She was not sure what came next. But for the first time in 6 weeks, the not knowing felt less like falling and more like standing at the edge of something that might, eventually, be worth the leap. She did not sleep well that night. This was not unusual. Sleep had been complicated for weeks, a mix of physical logistics and the particular restlessness of a mind that was not done processing things even when her body was exhausted. But tonight the restlessness had a different quality. Not dread. Not grief. Something more complex and more awake. She lay in the dark above the bookshop and thought about back lanes and boundary marker errors, and a man who had spent 3 days following her through a market town because he was done waiting. She thought about the smile, the real one, the unguarded one. And she thought about what Petra had said 6 weeks ago about coming back when she was ready, and she thought about the difference between ready and willing and resolved, which were 3 different things, and she was not sure which one she was. At 3 in the morning, she sat up, lit the lamp, and made a list. This was what she did when she could not think clearly through a problem. She made lists. Organized, catalogued, brought the scattered parts into a structure she could navigate. She had been doing it since she was 8 years old, and she was not going to stop now. The list had 2 columns. What she knew, and what she did not know. What she knew: she was 20 weeks pregnant with an heir to the Ashvale Pack throne. She was living in a neutral town where she had built, quietly and without assistance, a functional life. The Alpha King had postponed his political bonding ceremony and followed her 80 miles south and stood in a back lane and admitted he had been wrong about all of it, which was a sentence she would not have believed 6 weeks ago. She knew that the bond was real and that ignoring it had a cost and that the cost was not going away. She knew that she was not the same person who had walked out of the Ashvale ring. That woman had been patient and invisible and expert at making herself convenient. She was still patient. She was considerably less invisible than she had been. And she was done with convenient. What she did not know, what Selim wanted exactly, in the specific and practical and long-term sense of the word. She had wants too, she had established that in the archive weeks ago, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. But wanting and having and building were 3 different things, and she had learned the hard way that the space between a man's private feelings and his public decisions was where women like her historically ended up. She looked at her list. She added a 3rd column. What she needed. She needed, very specifically, to not be a quiet secret. Not an arrangement. Not a complication managed behind closed doors while the world above continued to operate as though she did not exist. She had been invisible for 22 years. The child she was carrying was not going to grow up invisible because their father found invisibility convenient. She needed that to be said clearly, to be heard, and to be reflected in actual decisions rather than back lane admissions. She was not naive enough to think that was simple. She understood what it would cost him. The council, the Greystone Alliance, the political structure he had spent 4 years carefully building. She had always understood that. The understanding was not new. What was new was the conviction that the cost was his to carry, not hers. She folded the list. She put it in the box with Petra's letters. She went back to bed and lay in the dark and felt the bond, warm and close and 12 miles away, because wherever he was sleeping in Verith, it was no longer 80 miles. In the morning, Doris appeared at her door with tea and the expression that meant she had observations. "There is a man downstairs," Doris said. Celine looked at the clock. It was 7:45. "He has been there since 7, Doris added. "Very large. Very serious. Bought a book." "What book?" "Territorial Boundary Law in the Neutral Zones, 1890 to 1950. Doris's expression was deeply meaningful. "Your subject area, I believe." Celine looked at the clock again. He was 15 minutes early. He had bought a book on the relevant subject area. She drank her tea. She got dressed. She went downstairs. He was sitting in the chair by the bookshop window that got the morning light, reading the Boundary Law book with the same focused attention she had watched him give land records in the Ashvale archive, and he looked up when she appeared with a directness that was as natural to him as breathing, and waited. "You are early," she said. "You said 8 o'clock," he said. "I was concerned about lateness. Edvard does not actually know who you are. His dislike of lateness applies equally to everyone." "I know," he said. "That is not why I am here early." She looked at him in the morning light, large and certain, and currently holding a book on neutral zone territorial boundary law, and felt something in the careful structure of her not hope develop another crack. "The land grants I mentioned," she said. The cross-referencing issue is in the 1943 survey. The original survey markers do not match the 1947 revised maps, and Edvard has been filing them under the 1947 dates, which means when anyone searches by original survey date, they get nothing. A systematic misfiling, he said. 23 years of it. He stood. He was, in the bookshop in the morning light, even more physically present than she had been accounting for in her careful mental reconstruction of the previous evening, and the bond was warm and immediate and not being helpful. "Show me," he said. She showed him. They spent 4 hours in the Verith Records office, pulling files and cross-referencing dates and identifying the full scope of the 1943 survey misfiling, while Edvard moved around them with the slightly stunned expression of a man who had not previously worked in the presence of a very large, very focused person who apparently had strong opinions about systematic archival errors. Selim was, as she had known he would be, excellent at it. He found 2 additional misfilings she had missed. He did not make a production of this. He simply set the files on the table between them and said, "Here and here," and went back to his stack. She looked at the 2 files. She looked at him. She added them to the list without comment. At noon, Edvard brought them tea with the air of a man who has decided to just let things unfold and not ask questions he probably could not handle the answers to. Selim thanked him with the particular courtesy of a person who has learned that this kind of courtesy is not weakness. Edvard looked slightly startled by this and retreated to his office. "The child," Selim said, when Edvard's door closed. Celine had been waiting for this. "What about them?" she said. "I need to tell you something," he said. He was not looking at a file. He was looking at her with a directness she had stopped trying to look away from somewhere around the 2nd hour of cross-referencing. "When I was in the ring. When I said what I said. I had been told by Barak that the bond would be easier to suppress if it was publicly discredited. That the pack perception of the bond was what gave it power, and that if I removed the perception, the wolf would follow." Celine kept her expression very steady. "He was wrong," Selim said. "I know," she said. "The wolf did not follow. The wolf has spent 6 weeks pacing and pulling south and destroying my ability to function, and Barak's theory was," he paused, "he has never been bonded. He does not know what it actually is. And another pause. I trusted a theory over what I already knew, over what I had been learning in the archive for 6 weeks." "What had you been learning?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "That I was less," he said, "in the ring, before you, than I had allowed myself to be anywhere else." He said it simply, without apparent embarrassment, as a man states something he has spent a long time identifying and has decided to stop avoiding. Not weaker. Less performed. Less built. More like something I had not had reason to be since I was very young. Celine looked at him. "You were reading land records in a dusty archive," she said. "Yes," he said. "You were annoyed about the boundary marker errors." "I was," he said. "You fixed my ladder without telling me." He did not answer that. But she saw the answer in the way he looked at her, and it was enough. They went back to the cross-referencing. They finished the 1943 survey misfiling by mid-afternoon and started on the 1951 land grant inconsistencies, because there were always more inconsistencies. There were always more things in poorly maintained archives that needed patient, thorough attention, and Celine had learned that this was not a stopping point but a process, and you did the work because the work mattered, not because you could see the end of it. At 5 o'clock, she put down her files. She looked at him. "I have a list," she said. He looked up. "Of what I need," she said. "Not what I want. What I need. If you're going to be in Verith, cataloging land grants and fixing misfiled surveys, then these are the things that need to be true. Non-negotiable. Not managed. True." He held her gaze. "Tell me." She told him. She told him about not being invisible, about the child not growing up in ambiguity, about decisions being made with her, not around her, about the council and the alliance and the things that would cost him, and about the fact that the cost was his to carry, and she was not going to absorb it for him the way she had absorbed everything else for everyone else her entire life. She told him all of it, steadily and without apology, and she watched him receive it with the focused attention of a man who was listening not to respond but to understand. When she finished, the records office was quiet. "That is fair," he said. "It is not a negotiation," she said. "It is not me telling you what I need so you can find a version that is slightly easier. It is the list." "I know," he said. "It is fair." She looked at him. "The council is going to be," he paused. "It is going to require handling." "I know. Barrick specifically is going to." "I know," she said. "I am not asking you to say it will be easy. I am asking you to say it will be done." He was quiet for a moment. "It will be done," he said. She studied his face. The controlled precision. The something underneath it. She thought about back lane admissions and 7:45 in the morning, and a book on neutral zone territorial boundary law sitting on a chair by a window in a bookshop. She thought about the list. About what she knew and what she did not know and what she needed. "There is one more thing," she said. "Tell me." "I found 3 more boundary errors in the Silver Fen correspondence," she said. "I said I would send them back to Ashvale. I have not decided whether to do that yet." He looked at her very carefully. "Because the errors are in the archive," she said, "and I am in Verith. And what I do with the errors depends on what I decide to do with the larger question of where I am going to be." "Yes," he said. "I have not decided that yet," she said. "I know," he said. "You are going to have to give me more than 4 hours of cross-referencing and a speech in a back lane." "I know," he said. "I am not asking for a decision tonight." "What are you asking for?" He looked at her with the directness that had never, she realized, been coldness. Had never been the absence of feeling. Had been, from the very beginning, the opposite. A man so accustomed to keeping things controlled that the act of looking directly at something real, something unchosen and unmanageable and inconvenient, had required the archive and the land records and the long afternoons and all of it, just to get to here. "Tomorrow," he said. "I am asking for tomorrow." Celine looked at him. 8 o'clock, she said. "There are 1951 land grants that are not going to sort themselves." She picked up her coat. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame, because something in her would not let her go without saying the thing she had been carrying since the back lane, the thing that was true regardless of the list and the council and the decision that had not yet been made. "Selim," she said. He looked at her. You were not less in the archive, she said. You were more. That is what frightened you. She left. She walked home in the early dark with the bond warm and present and not yet resolved, carrying everything she had built and everything she had not yet decided, and the quiet growing weight of a person who did not yet know what world they were being born into. But she was going to make sure it was a good one. That was the decision she had already made. The one that did not require a back lane or a list or a man in an archive who was working his way, slowly and imperfectly and with genuine effort, toward something she had not given up believing in. She was going to make it a good world. What she did not know, what she could not have known, walking home through the Verith evening with autumn pressing cold against her coat, was that a rider from Greystone had arrived in Ashvale that afternoon. That Mira Ashworth had, after 6 weeks of quiet management, made the decision that the situation was no longer quietly manageable. That Elder Barrick had received information that the Alpha King had left Ashvale without his guard, without notification, headed south in plain clothes toward a neutral territory town. She did not know that the rider had also carried a letter. She did not know what the letter said. She did not know that in the morning, when she arrived at the records office at 8 o'clock, the situation that had been tentatively, carefully, imperfectly beginning to resolve was going to be significantly more complicated. She walked home. She made tea. She sat above the bookshop in the lamplight and felt the bond, warm and close and present, and for the first time in 6 weeks, did not brace against it. Tomorrow, she thought. She had tomorrow. For now that was enough. To be continued. And that is where we leave them. Celine, above her bookshop, with a cup of tea and a bond she has stopped bracing against, and a decision that is not yet made but is no longer impossible. Selim, 12 miles away in a Verith inn, with 4 hours of land-grant cross-referencing and a list of non-negotiables, and the first honest conversation he has had in years. And somewhere between Greystone and Ashvale, a letter that nobody in that bookshop knows about yet. I told you this one would wreck you. Part 2 is coming. We are going to find out what that letter says. We are going to find out what Elder Barrick does when the alpha he has managed for 4 years stops being manageable. We are going to find out whether Mira Ashworth is an enemy, an ally, or something far more complicated than either. And we are going to find out whether Selim Varin, who has spent his entire adult life doing what was necessary, finally learns how to do what is right. And most importantly, we are going to find out what Celine decides. If you are not subscribed yet, please do it right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you do not miss part 2 the moment it drops. If you loved this story, leave me a comment below telling me which moment got you the most. The back lane? The archive? The 745? The list? I read every single comment and I love knowing which parts of a story land. Share this with someone who needs a slow burn that actually delivers. And if you want to be the first to know when part 2 is live, the notification bell is your best friend. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in part 2.